Welcome to the webinar Data Representation and Digital Storytelling in Intangible Cultural Heritage. This is part of the project Notes and Patterns, which is co-founded by the European Union and is a collaboration between three partner institutions, the Biennial Textile Art Biennial, hosted by Karnika Institute in Slovenia, the National Museum in Gdańsk with the Department of Ethnography in Poland, and the Biennale of Western Balkans in Greece, which is the organizer of the webinar. We will explore contemporary aspects of intangible cultural heritage, also folklore and historical popular culture. The webinar also introduces the term database storytelling, which is coined within the project with the aim to explore how structured data and digital infrastructures can be used as a basis for data-driven analysis and narratives within the intangible cultural heritage domain, but also more broadly in the interdisciplinary arts and humanities. Let's begin now with session 3, the concluding session, titled Critical Infrastructures and Digital Pedagogies, Ethics, Co-Design and Human-Computer Interaction. And I would like to welcome Penny Hagen, Director Tangata Tiriti, and Angie Tangaere, Kaitohu Tangata Whenua from the Auckland Co-Design Lab in New Zealand. Thank you very much, Penny and Angie, for being a part of the webinar and for accepting this invitation. And we are looking forward to learning more from your practice.
Nō reira he mihi nui ki a koutou. Ko hikirangi te maunga ko waipu te awa ko Ngāti Parau te iwi. Ko Angie Tangaere wai ko wai te kaitohu tangata whenua I roto te Auckland Co-Design Lab. Indigenous greetings from New Zealand Aotearoa. Hikirangi is my maunga, Waipu is my awa, and Ngāti Parau is my tribe. And I'm Angie Tangaere. I'm the co-director at the Auckland Co-Design Lab, and I'll pass it over to Penny to introduce herself.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Lovely to say hello to everybody. My name's Penny Hagen. I am dialing into you from Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland, he Pākehā, I'm Pākehā, and I'm alongside Angie, the co-director of the Auckland Co-Design Lab. It's a pleasure to be with you today. We are really excited to be part of your Knots and Patterns Creative Europe program. I think it's evening time for you, it's morning time for us, and we're really pleased to just be sharing a little bit about our practice and our work and the evolution that we've had over the last 10 years, connecting our practice into place. I'm going to start off just with a little background, and then I'm going to hand to Angie, who has led a lot of our practice evolution over the last 10 years to share the story of how that's come about. So first of all, a little bit about who are we, the Auckland Co-Design Lab. We are based in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in our largest city, and we've been set up by our central government and hosted inside a local government in Auckland to connect the worlds between communities on the ground, particularly in South and West Auckland, and central government decision making. So we are much smaller than we look in the picture, but we occupy a very small space in between different government decision-making levels and community. So we have a local and central focus. We're really all about trying to shift the dial on inequity for communities and doing that through shifting public sector norms around policies, investment, how communities are involved in decision-making. And so we have our feet on the ground in place, but a focus on shifting the systems that set the conditions for how families can thrive in the communities that we live and work in. When we were first set up 10 years ago now, there was a clear approach around co-design. It was a popular idea of ways that we could involve communities in participatory decision-making. And the lab was set up to experiment with that methodology and to bring together communities, different people working in communities, different organisations, and people from across the public sector to see if we could address complex social issues through something like a co-design or participatory methodology. And when we were set up, we had a focus on 3 challenge areas: the early years, so children or tamariki, and how we can enable families to thrive, driver's licensing in terms of young people and their access to mobility, And then the attitude gap, which was around employment and getting young people into employment, and the clash that seemed to occur between them and employers in our area in terms of the ways that they thought about the world. And so these were all representative of complex social and economic issues in our communities. And we were set up in a co-design and challenge methodology so that we might try and tackle these things in 3 or 4 months. There was a real exciting opportunity in terms of bringing people together, but also that methodology put a number of constraints around how we might work with communities, and it was very much grounded initially in Western ideas of design, and the co-design was something that still sort of needed to be worked out. What did that actually mean? And Angie's going to talk to us about how that's evolved over time and how that's really become much more grounded in the context of where we are in Aotearoa in the Pacific in New Zealand. Regardless of kind of the starting points for the methodology, this is the most simplest way that we talk about our approach, and Angie's going to expand on that further. Co-design always puts lived experience at the centre, but it was still very much drawing on dominant Western models. But we wanted to work together with families to try and test new things on the ground. And right from the beginning, Indigenous knowledge systems was critical to that. And so I'm going to hand to Ange about how that has really grown to become the leading factor in our practice now.
Thanks, Penny. So as Penny was describing, even though co-design, the Western model of co-design, we were utilising that as a way of thinking about addressing complex problems, we also were drawing on Indigenous knowledge and recognise the power of the lived experience of communities and families. And as a result of that, and us thinking about how we become more culturally grounded in the way that we did our work alongside community and in system, we started to think about the types of cultural practices that might complement the models that we were, the 4-diamond model that we were working with at the time. And that was really important in terms of us becoming increasingly aware of needing to contextualize the way that we are working to reflect the story of Aotearoa and the story of place and our stories of communities and the stories of families. So we started to develop ways of thinking about how we could develop cultural practices that sat alongside the model. Could you go to the next slide? Thanks, Penny. And they were really important for us to be able to create the spaces and processes for our families and communities that were experiencing the most inequity to feel welcomed and to feel valued and to feel safe. In the way that we were working together with communities and families to think about how we support those families and communities to lead the innovation processes. So that was really important, that those communities and those families could see themselves in the processes and in the spaces as we were collaborating to create innovation around solutions that families were creating based on what matters to families in place for their well-being. Could you go to the next slide? So here's some of our amazing families that we work alongside and who were really integral in helping us develop this practice, and these families were leading out some of the innovation processes in place to create compelling alternatives to the way that we're supporting families for wellbeing right now. Could you go to the next one, please, Penny? And over time, we continue to develop those cultural practices and processes that sat along our Western models, but we also were leaning into Indigenous frameworks and methodologies as the innovation methodologies themselves. And this is one of the methodologies, one of the knowledge systems we've been lucky enough to learn about through one of our knowledgeable elders here in Aotearoa, Matua Ririata Makiha. And so we move from developing cultural practices and processes to complement Western models towards utilising Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing as innovation methodologies in their own sense. And what these models help us to do is to move away from ways of working that aren't helping us to grapple with complex issues, and they help us by creating processes, practices, and ways of being that help us to attune to cultural values that move us away from intervention, crisis models towards well-being models, away from, example, individualism to thinking about collectivism and well-being for communities and for the country. And this particular model particularly helps us to think about attuning to each other in relationship, attuning to our environment, and attuning to the mission that we are working together towards to create. And this is an ancient navigation model that helps us to be in relationship with each other differently, to attune to each other differently, to think about rhythm and space as opposed to project planning and intervention logics. This helps us to fundamentally be different in the way we are with each other and the way we approach our most complex problems. And it's been such a pleasure to share with you all today, and we hope that you have enjoyed this 10-minute session on how our innovation methodology and practice has evolved. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Awesome. Thanks, Ange. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for having us.
Thank you a lot, Penny and Angie. And let's move forward with our second speaker, Kostas Karpouzis, Assistant Professor in the Pantheon University of Social and Political Sciences in Athens, Greece. Dr. Karpouzis, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Of course, let me start the presentation and share my window. Okay. So this presentation will describe our research in the context of an upcoming book chapter that will be part of a book that we're editing along with Professor Yannis Karpelos, also from Pantheon University. The book will be published by Springer later this year, hopefully, and will be called Computational Methods in the Digital Humanities. So in this work, I'm discussing the different problems and pitfalls that may arise from using AI in the context of digital humanities. And coming from the computer science background, most of the times we talk about biases and the way that we train systems, but that's not the only issue that may arise in these artificial intelligence systems. So in most cases, when we're talking about identifying specific use cases of AI in the digital humanities, we're talking about some sort of classification or pattern identification. For instance, we want to process painting, or we want to process written text and identify either its style or the style of the author, of the painter, and so on. If you've seen, for instance, a TV series that's streaming on Netflix called Unabomber, they're talking about digital criminology, in the sense that I'm going to use artificial intelligence in order to identify the author of written text and so on. This also applies, of course, to natural language processing techniques, but also to identifying specific niches or specific phrases or sentences that an author uses. They make their production, their generation distinct. Another popular use case has to do with utilizing computer vision techniques to analyze artifacts, either in the form of maps or written text, but also three-dimensional objects that we may find while digging in an archaeological site and so on. And of course, over the past 3 or 4 years, especially since the advent of ChatGPT as a free and easy to use platform, we've started using artificial intelligence to generate content, mostly in the form of text, but over the past 6 months or 12 months, we've also been using it to generate images and videos. So especially if you're in social media, you may have seen a large number of cartoon-like or comic-like images produced based on the profile pictures of different users. Studio Ghibli, of course, is the prominent example of this approach. So people were, coming for the first time in contact with Studio Ghibli and its aesthetic and its technique through this modern use of generative AI technology. And over the past days, we've also seen generation of very realistic videos. For instance, I was just watching a video, sort of a prank video, a joke video about President Trump and the tariffs that he's going to impose on islands where only penguins live. So people would use ChatGPT and other related technologies to generate videos starting from text, starting from a prompt that they would supply to this AI service. And they would generate videos showing President Trump visiting the Antarctica and being attacked by penguins and so on. So it's not just we're talking, about serious work, about work that may be awarded an Academy Award. That was the case with the latest Academy Awards. But we're also talking about what would be characterized as pop culture in most cases. So as I said in the beginning of this presentation, we are mostly discussing algorithmic bias when we want to discuss the things that may go wrong when we're applying AI techniques in data in general, but in this case in the digital humanities. So the idea here is that most of the AI systems will learn based on data that we supply them. In most cases, we use what we call convenience sampling. So we're training our artificial intelligence systems with the data that they're easy to find. Maybe these are pictures that we collect from social media or from our students. Maybe it's questionnaires that we pass around to the people we know and they fill them in and so on. And this means that the neural networks that we're going to train based on this data will actually learn to replicate the biases contained in those data that were used to train them. And this has been shown to create many problems, especially when some parts of the population are not equally represented in the training set. I'm using a popular example which has to do with facial recognition systems, which are less accurate when identifying people who are not classified as Caucasian. Maybe they're people from, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from South America, and so on. And this, of course, may pose a lot of danger when police authorities are using facial recognition. But in the case of digital humanities, we need to explore more the whole process of using data to train AI system. One prominent example has to do with collecting data from what we call the global south to train AI models. And this has to do with what those people get it back as in return for providing this data. Another part, which is also related, has to do with labeling those data. Because labeling data in order to train an AI system is very expensive, both with respect to time and, of course, with respect to money. In many cases, large corporations may offset this cost to parts of the world where labor is less expensive than in the Western world. So again, these people are used to create very well-performing and well-known AI systems, but they get very little in return. And of course, at the end of the day, I briefly mentioned ChatGPT earlier. You may remember about 3 or 3.5 years ago where ChatGPT was first made available. We were talking about the training data, the data set that was used to train ChatGPT. So what was announced by OpenAI, the company that runs ChatGPT, was that they effectively scraped most of Wikipedia. They gathered long pieces of text from blogs that were available at that time, and also digitized books when they could get the actual text to train them. And of course, most of this information, especially when it comes to Wikipedia, comes from people in the West. So it makes sense to expect that it represents what we call Western epistemology, so the way that we think in the West. And a popular example that I like to use when teaching this to my students has to do with the right of women to study and go to the university and so on. So I think that across the Western world, if you ask this question, you will get 99.9% of people to tell you that, of course, every person has the right to go to the university and study and so on. But if you ask this question to some populations, for instance, in Southeast Asia, or even in most extreme cases, the Taliban population, you would expect that you won't get many positive answers there. Of course, we all agree that this is a fundamental right, okay, and it goes without saying, but those people are not reflected. The opinion of those people is not reflected to AI systems. So there's some sort of Western ethics embedded in both recognition and classification, and also content generation using artificial intelligence. Here are some specific examples that come from both, I would say, examples, from both kinds of examples. Mostly when we face Western epistemology, we see its impact on what we say the colonial or post-colonial way of thinking. And this is why I also included a typical example from identifying and characterizing images from the subcontinent of India. There's also a very large discussion when we're talking about underrepresented languages. And this, of course, is a major issue because most of the content that is generated via AI, maybe it's ChatGPT or other engines, but in any case, it's mostly in English. So other languages run the risk of becoming extinct. And we see that not only in the case of AI, but also in representation over the web in general. And we need to make sure that languages which are less represented are still present in the data sets, which is very important because in the early cases of generative AI, what was the case was that the vast majority of the training set consisted of texts in English, German, Spanish, and other Western languages. And whenever people from other countries using other languages wanted to use ChatGPT, it actually used some sort of internal translation. And we all know that machine translation is becoming better with the time, but of course it's not going to be the best, and it's not going to be 100% correct. So we need to make sure that those underrepresented languages are not distorted by not taking into account the local populations. So I briefly talked about algorithmic bias, about how underrepresented minorities may result in training data that actually perpetuates those biases. I briefly talked about injecting only Western ideals, what I call Western classifications, and of course the epistemic injustice in AI. And the fourth, I would say, pillar of this colonial structure has to do with resources harvested, data resources harvested from the global south. These are actually some cases, some examples of actual decolonization examples, I would say. So in many cases, local populations have insisted that their cultural heritage has been represented equally when it comes to training datasets or classifying images, and especially things related to culture, such as clothing or the languages. And of course, we need to make sure, and by we meaning I mean people in the West who more often take the initiative to design new AI systems in the digital humanities. We need to make sure that we also include them in the design process. We take into account their needs and not only our needs. I briefly stopped because I was going to use the word stakeholder, which in essence is also a colonial word. If you've seen movie pictures of, the immigrants going to America for the first time and reaching the Wild West and so on. So the stake was the piece of metal they would place on the land to signify that this land became their own. And of course, this is the essence of colonialism. So again, we should also try to decolonize our language before going to, discussing with people how to decolonize the whole AI in the age process. So this later part had to do with what we call community-led data curation. So it's not only about identifying data and getting data from underrepresented minorities, but also about labeling them and collecting them and so on. We need to make sure that, of course, AI literacy is a major issue, and we need to make sure that there are enough educational initiatives, especially again in people and in parts of the population who are underrepresented in the universities and don't necessarily have the skills to work in AI systems, but they are competent enough to, for instance, collect data and label data and maybe critically evaluate AI systems. And finally, of course, interdisciplinary research collaboration has to do with not relying only on technology to design and build systems, but also use a wide variety of scientists and end users and interested parties, anthropologists, of course, people who are from the cultural part, from the analog part, so to speak, of the whole process. So if I want to summarize and finish my presentation, I think that the first step has to do with identifying the fact and accepting the fact that AI will be biased. There's never going to be, and this is an issue by design, a problem by design, there's never going to be a really bias-free AI system because it depends on data. We may do a perfect work to actually represent all parts of the population and all epistemologies and so on in our data, but it will never be 100% representative. But of course, that doesn't mean that we don't have the moral obligation and the actual obligation to work towards eliminating or reducing these biases. Working together with the local communities, of course, is key, and try to embrace non-Western knowledge systems. In some of my work, I have discussed, for instance, the teachings of ancient Greek philosophers such as Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, and what they are discussing and teaching. Remember, their work was produced more than 2,500 years ago, and these works are very relevant to the issues that we're talking about. So maybe looking at alternate epistemologies would be the start of the solution, the beginning of a solution, and also, of course, ancient cultures have a lot to do because at the end of the day, we have not evolved as much as people as as the population of Earth. We have not evolved as much as we think. So thank you so much, and I hope you have some questions to discuss.
Thank you so much, Kostas, for these excellent points and for pointing out also the colonial perspectives of our own language when we're discussing about this project. I would have a question. I think that it has partly been answered already by your very intriguing work and presentation. I was thinking that recently UNESCO opened this important conversation on the emerging ethical issues in relation to intangible cultural heritage and artificial intelligence. And at the same time, there is a growing number of typologies and methodologies that in sort of type of classifications or any other type of principles, ethical principles that are being published on AI ethics and their translation actually into the ethical principles into practice. So I was wondering, in your view, what key ethical considerations could be prioritized when developing AI-driven research methodologies in community-centered cultural heritage, particularly such as ICH? Any insights in that?
The major driver for ethical AI research and deployment has to do with actually trying to solve a problem and not coming up with a fancy solution, because this is something that us computer scientists often like to do. We like to create new shiny games and toys, okay, which absolutely make no sense. And then we try to integrate them into something tangible and, change people's lives and so on. And it shouldn't work like this. It should be the other way around. So we need to listen more to people. And I'm not just talking about, indigenous populations or underrepresented populations. I'm talking about even mainstream applications, right? We need to listen more to people and try to solve those problems using the fantastic tools that we have at our disposal, and not try to show off that, we are competent in this text-to-image generator and create 1,000, cartoons using one prompt and so on. So this is one part. And the other part is that I think we need to embrace that it's not going to be an easy ride, a walk in the park. Okay, there are going to be issues, and we need to accept that technology is never neutral. Maybe it's not positive, maybe it's not negative. Of course, it depends on the way that you use it. But at the end of the day, it's not neutral. The earliest piece of technology that we have was fire, right? And you can use fire to produce fantastic things, and you can use fire to burn down a building or a person and so on. So this is the positive and negative part. But even if you try to go with the positive road, with the positive part, you have burned a piece of wood, and this piece of wood will never come back. So this is why I'm saying that technology is never neutral. And this is why I closed the presentation. I finished the presentation discussing AI literacy. So my claim is that next to reading and writing in an analog form, we need to make sure that people and our children, our young students, are literate in AI and computational issues.
Thank you so much, Kostas, for these insights and the discussion on AI ethics. And I would like to move forward and invite our last speakers for session 3, Stavroula, Zoe, and George Trichopoulos. They are members of the Intelligent Interaction Research Group at the Department of Cultural Technology and Communication in the University of the Aegean in Lesbos, Greece, which is a research group supervised by Associate Professor Dr. George Karidakis. They will give us 2 lightning talks as part of a roundtable discussion titled Digital Storytelling and Virtual Spaces in Arts and Heritage. Stavroula Zoe is a computer scientist and an interdisciplinary researcher who is specializing in creative technologies. She is a postdoctoral researcher at the Intelligent Interaction Research Group and is also a laboratory instructor at the Athens School of Fine Arts in the Multimedia Laboratory, focusing on human creativity in intelligent XR environments. And George Trichopoulos is an IT engineer and PhD candidate at the Department of Cultural Technology and also as a member of the Intelligent Interaction Research Group, who is specializing in digital storytelling for cultural heritage applying computational methods and artificial intelligence. So, George and Stavroula, thank you a lot for accepting this invitation. And over to you. Who is starting first? Is it Voula?
We'll start.
Okay, George.
Okay. So
Over
hello,
to you.
everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Mariana. I feel really an honor. It's an honor for me to be here, and I'm very happy. And let me share my presentation, a short presentation. Is it okay? Can you see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
It's great, yes.
Okay. So my topic is digital storytelling for intangible cultural heritage. And I will start with a story as a storyteller. I'm, in the heart of Palestine, there is a tradition of hikaye, which are narrative folk tales passed down orally by women only. And that has been a cornerstone of cultural expression for many centuries. These stories are rich with social themes and historical accounts, and they were traditionally shared in the domestic settings, in home, usually during winter evenings. And they foster family and community bonds, and they preserve collective memory. However, with the advent of modern media and socio-political challenges on this country, this oral tradition faced the threat of fading into obscurity. Some researchers started to record and archive these stories. They created interactive website to share the stories both locally and globally. And the result of these platforms were that they revitalized the interest for hikaye, especially among younger generations who are more attuned to digital mediums. Of course, there are so many other examples of digital storytelling techniques that were used to preserve intangible cultural heritage all over the world. And the point is that digital storytelling is the most primitive and the fundamental way we learn. And the narratives connect us emotionally, and they connect us with our past. And this exact feature of a narrative is that give us the opportunity to remember the stories. It's easier for us to remember stories than abstract facts. Narratives can get cross-cultural. They can transcend language and geographical boundaries. They can build bridges between cultures, and they can help us appreciate unfamiliar traditions and values in a very engaging ways. And they can be empowered by community. Anybody can share his or her story, and they can be accessible by anyone as long as anyone has a computer or a mobile phone and an internet connection. So storytelling has evolved. We are storytellers since 1,000 years now. We started by writing stories and or saying them orally. And during the 80s, the computers enter our homes, and we used computers to write stories, to store them, to edit them, share them. And then the computers became more powerful, and we started having branching stories, interactive stories. And nowadays, with the advent of artificial intelligence, we have computational methods to create stories. Actually, the computer started becoming a co-author or author, and it's a part of the computers started to be part of the process of storytelling. And actually, artificial intelligence can assist in digital storytelling in two ways, either by reading and understanding stories, analyzing them, and on the classification and archiving of the stories, and at the second way as a tool for creating stories, which can be very, very useful in some cases. And we as a team, we have exploited the power of the large language models, actually the ChatGPT 4. We explored the power of ChatGPT to be a museum assistant, both a museum guide or as a recommendation system in museums and exhibits. And the potential of these systems is huge. The impact they are going to have to bring on our society is huge. And of course, there are some other media and technologies to help share narratives. The classic traditional now mobile apps. We can use tangible interfaces to share our narratives, and tangible interfaces can be very powerful because they can stimulate more senses in our body. The embodied systems like robots and the holograms can be very impressive. And of course, we have the immersive power of augmented and virtual reality, something that my colleague Voula will talk about in a while. So thank you for this very short presentation. I'm ready for your questions and anything you need to discuss.
Thank you so much, George. And let's continue with Voula, and we will follow with questions afterwards.
Okay, hello, everyone. Mariana, thank you very much for the invitation. One moment to share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? It's okay.
Yes, now we can. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I will speak a little bit about virtual spaces, focusing mostly in artistic education, which is my experience. So from the ancient murals of Lascaux caves created around 19,000 years ago to the digital spaces of today, humanity has always sought different ways to create immersive environments in order to tell the stories of its time. From the Sword of Damocles of Ivan Sutherland in 1960, technologies have evolved towards greater accessibility, and today a growing ecosystem of open technologies, tools, and platforms supports diverse applications in storytelling and education. In recent years, accelerated mostly by COVID-19 pandemic, prestigious institutional art spaces such as Cannes Film Festival and Venice Biennale have begun to actively incorporate immersive media in their categories, acknowledging a growing role in contemporary storytelling and artistic expression. Virtual production has also been highly affected by games engines such as Unreal and Unity, allowing filmmakers to synchronize digital with real-world environments. These tools are available to all of us, and especially educators and students. So, in this now on, I will show you a little bit some of samples from students' works. How can we rethink artistic education through these advanced means of representation and reality capture, such as 3D scanning, now possible even only through our smartphones? What is different today when the viewer inhabits the image itself what implications does this have for education, and especially artistic education? And how can these experiences be translated into knowledge for future generations? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Voula, for this lightning talk, also together with George. What I'm wondering, looking at these projects, is in terms of sustainability, particularly regarding software preservation, since we're talking about sustainable practices. How resilient are digital storytelling applications and interactive platforms over time? Given that there is a rapidly evolving software and media landscape. And maybe this is the first question.
Voula, would you like to start? Yes.
This is not an easy question to answer. From my experience, digital storytelling tools can be quite fragile. Many platforms rely on proprietary technologies, and they often become obsolete. One such example is Flash. I think you know, most of you know about it. It's one of the most famous examples because once dominant in interactive storytelling, now it's completely deprecated. Yes, this is a major problem, especially in artistic education, because artworks become inaccessible and there's no migration support. As I told you, it's not an easy question to answer. There's not one solution, but maybe we may focus more on community-based and open standards. And I think documentation through text, images, and video is a good solution, just to have the idea and the story behind the artwork preserved for next generations.
Thank you, Voula. Thank you so much.
I could add something on that.
Yes, yes, George.
So in the life cycle of any application around the world, 80% of the time is dedicated to its maintenance. However, every application is ultimately doomed to be abandoned at some point for reason of cost, changing the needs and the changing technologies. In some applications, this end comes after years. However, the lifespan of applications that were built upon based on LLMs, it's much shorter, perhaps only a few months. LLMs are developing and changing the technological landscape at a pace that we have not seen in the past with any other technology. So I believe that what we should focus is not developing applications, but is developing methodologies, good practices, and ethical rules about using artificial intelligence and building tools.
Thank you, George. I'm wondering, actually, as it seems these tools are very fragile, or they may stop working properly very quickly. Are there any other strategies? You mentioned methodologies. Are there any strategies or initiatives in place to support a kind of a long-term viability? And I mean, not just in terms of preservation that is non-functional, but a kind of a preservation that can actively maintain the working state of an application, like a usable platform.
This is very difficult to achieve right now because of the speed of evolution. Of course, it's all a matter of cost. These platforms can be, of course, built some tools to maintain, to have some strategies to maintain the existing applications. But It's a matter of cost. It's a matter of having people working on that, having time, spending time on that, and so it's a matter of cost, basically. But I believe it's right now it's not worth it. Everything is changing so fast that we cannot spend money and time on applications right now. Things are evolving very, very fast.
Indeed, indeed, and maybe this is a closing remark in describing our contemporary situation right now, like the rapid evolvement of everything and the evolution. So I would say that thank you so much for this discussion in this closing roundtable on digital storytelling and virtual spaces in arts and heritage, George and Voula, and as we come to the end of this webinar, I would like to thank again all our speakers for the very insightful and thought-provoking presentations throughout the 3 sessions. And of course, a big thank you to all of you who joined us and participated in the discussion. So we hope this webinar today, the presentations and conversations can spark meaningful perspectives and connections. And we look forward to continuing also inside the Notes and Patterns project, this exchange, and of course in future events and collaborations. So thank you again, everyone.
We thank you, Mariana, very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.